be clear on how you want to show up, because other people have their own desired value props for you based off of what they need. Anything that's requiring you to betray yourself, it's a no, because that hurts your overall brand too. Welcome back to the Fast Forward Podcast. I am closing out the month in a conversation on employee relations, talking to you and sharing with you some tips and nuggets that I have had to learn most of the time the hard way about employee relations. You've probably seen the episode where I talked about the stakeholders involved in employee relations, and you've probably heard the episode where I described the functional areas of employee relations. Hopefully you watched the Out of Scope episode where I talked about Crimson Tide and all of the amazing nuggets that you can learn from Captain Ramsey and some of his shenanigans. But for you, I really wanted to talk about how you can leverage employee relations to build your own professional brand. Let's start with talking formulas, 'cause I love a good formula because it helps to ground you into the pieces that you do well, what you need to work on, etc. So I wrote it down. For me, a brand is the experience plus the value. And so that means the experience that people have through your work, through your communication, through your style, but also the value that you bring. So what do they get out of it? Now, value is interesting, and we're going to talk at length about it, but I want you to just hold on to that word in particular. It's important to have a professional brand because you have to be able to communicate that brand. That includes through things like your resume, your social profiles, your personal websites. If you have one, I would suggest that you have one. Your professional portfolio. The brand can be communicated through the relationships that you build. And so let's dig into even just that a little bit. So first and foremost, your brand is communicated through your resume or your curriculum vitae, depending on which one you use. Your resume is the list of accomplishments, of wins, of prestige, of the goals that you set for yourself, the, of course, titles that you've held, which in many cases communicate money, right? So your financial worth, and all of that matters. So when you look at your resume, more than paying attention to what is there, pay attention to what's not. I did this exercise, I want to say, when was this? Well, let me think about where I was working. So it's probably 2012, maybe even 2011. And up to that point, I had been working in what would be considered the nonprofit space. So it was in social services. And I knew that I wanted to transition to government work because at that time I was finishing my first master's in public management at DePaul. And I knew I wanted to go work in government because that's what I was getting my master's in. I felt like there was a lot of job security there. I felt like it was just a good next step. And I wanted to start working in HR formally. So I wanted a direct HR role instead of a quasi HR role. So I did what I thought was the best thing, and I went to SHRM's website. Because at that time, like, there are other organizations that have popped up, but at that time, SHRM was pretty much the only one that had a real, just like, complete library, you could say, of resources to help you build your HR career. And at that time, it's called something different now, but at that time, it was the HR competency model. So it was like, these are the functional areas and the core competencies of HR. I think it's called the BASC now. But the point is, it gave you a key of the different HR functional areas and what those accomplish. I think it might have even had some information about titling and leveling and skills you should have, types of projects, etc. It was actually quite informative. So I took that, and at the time, ATD, or the Association for Talent Development, had a similar one for learning and development roles. So because I had been a trainer, I knew the ATD model would help me too, but then I also wanted the one for HR. And I sat there and mapped out my strengths and gaps. So I was like, okay, I've done work in this one, This I have a lot of experience. This I have a little bit. This I haven't touched at all. And started to map out a 10-year career plan to build my HR career in the areas that I wasn't strong in particular. So I knew it was going to take a long time. I mean, at the time, 10 years seemed like forever. It's crazy now because it's 2011. So it's been like 13, 14 years since then. That's insane. I cannot believe this. But I mapped out this 10-year plan and was like, okay, this is what I need to accomplish in that time, including certifications, types of companies I wanted to work for, types of projects I wanted to work on, titling, leveling, all of that stuff. And I did that because I knew what I wanted my resume to look like in 10 years. So to bring this back to the conversation about the resume, your resume is not just the Reader's Digest version of all the jobs you've had. It is the story of how you have shown up in your career. And the only person that can control how that story is written, the chapters, the characters, who gets to be a main character, who gets to be the antagonist, who gets to be the hero. The only person that controls that, sis, is you. And I know it can be difficult, especially now. It's a really tough job market right now. And so it can kind of feel like you're treading water. But keep in mind, that's just one piece of a much larger story. I had to take some right now jobs. I had to take some jobs that I hated just to pay the bills. Sometimes I had to leave jobs. A lot of times I had to leave jobs. I had to take demotions. I had to take lateral moves. Sometimes I took promotions that seemed a little out of the way, but it was a part of creating that overall story. And so when you think about how you are leveraging employee relations to build your professional brand, use your resume as your guide. And again, not just what's there now, but what's missing that you want to be there in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. The second piece to the formula is experience. What is the experience that people get to have with you? This will emerge over time, and it does rely on you getting feedback. And when I was about to say good feedback, but then I'd stop because I'm like, let me explain what I mean by good. Good feedback is exhaustive feedback. It is not positive only. So there are so many lessons I learned by the snide remarks, the critiques, and the criticisms that I've gotten from people, just as much as from the celebration. I've talked a lot about how I would be doing my boss's job, but then get, in some cases, actually written up for not doing my job, or negative performance evaluations for not doing my role. But that criticism is ironically what let me know that I was just working the wrong types of jobs. There was one job in particular where I think it was out of, let's say, 5. It was like numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I was killing this job. It was like this little easy job. And I got marked to a 4 out of 5. Even though this lady said you were doing an excellent job, stellar, superb. But when you finish your work, you could turn around and help the other team members because sometimes they get overwhelmed. And I was like, wait, so I'm getting knocked out because I'm not doing somebody else's job? And she was like, yeah, we just wish you would help out. And I was like, no, ma'am, let's back up. Because we all know that this lady is sitting here planning her wedding. She starts an hour later than me, leaves an hour later than me. I'm not responsible for making sure she can do her job. Like, that's her business. And if you want me to take on more work to balance her workload, then you need to assign that. And she would not change that performance review. I knew right there. All right, don't worry about it. I got something for that. And I knew. I was like, I'm finna get the beep, beep, beep out this mug. And I did. Hey, it was that criticism that let me know, man, this little low-level foolishness, like, for me to even be in a position where somebody could be controlling my money and my evaluations based off of this silliness, like, we've lost the plot, and I need to be looking for something different. Ironically, The next job that I went to, one of the very first all staff meetings, I was working for this charter school network. And I think I've talked about that before on the podcast. I can't remember, but half of them people ended up getting indicted, and they probably still in federal prison right now. That's a whole other conversation. It was a predominantly Hispanic and Latinx charter school network, and it was because that was the population on that side of town, and the leaders were all Hispanic, and they had this. I mean, they had it like in the policy that it was assimilation focused. This was one of the wildest things I've ever seen to this day, and they wouldn't let the kids speak Spanish. They wouldn't let the kids read books by Spanish authors. Like, it was really disturbed. And I remember speaking up at this all hands meeting when we were looking at the reading curriculum for the year. And I was like, hey, there are no books here by Hispanic authors. Like, why the kids can't read books by their own people? Like, that don't make sense to me. Y'all, I will never forget this. This man, the CEO of this charter school network, he looked down and got quiet. When I say it was like something out of a movie, you could hear a pin drop in this room, and it was like hundreds of folks. And he was like, well, what do you mean by that? What do you suggest? And I was like, oh, well, at the very least, the kids can read The House on Mango Street. Because I'm young, y'all. So I don't get at this point that, like, girl, shut up. You in the danger zone. Don't say nothing. So I'm just, I ain't looked around and saw the fact that other people looked like they was literally about to like lose it. And he was like, yes, we'll consider that. And then looked back up and kept going. After we went on a break, it was all these people coming up to me in hushed tones. Thank you for saying we would never speak up. And I was like, well, why y'all ain't speak up? Like, I'm new. You've been here for years. Later, I learned the man was like a freaking tyrant. Again, I'm pretty sure he got indicted and ended up going to prison. I should look that up. But his thing was, again, this assimilation, that he didn't want the kids embracing or celebrating their heritage and their culture at all. And me coming in speaking, again, my little Detroit behind, where we had African American and African literature focus. So I grew up learning of Black authors and Black thinkers and intellectual stuff. So I'm like, of course you could have it side by side. That was like blasphemy to him. And again, that criticism, this is the most important part. Right then, I got blackballed. I didn't know it, but first of all, there was all types of racial bias and discrimination against all the Black folks that worked in that whole network. The Black teachers, administrators, workers were relegated to either being janitors over disciplinary things or being substitutes. There were like Black folks in high up positions that were prominent. Again, it was a mess. I have to look up this chart. I want to see what they doing now, but it was a mess. When I say it was a mess, it was a mess. Do you understand me? It was a mess. And right then, because I was the full-time sub, I got blackballed and never was up for promote anything like that. Like, I was like the black sheep for real, for real. But that experience taught me that the criticism, the ostracism, the isolation that I experienced was because I questioned a core value that was never going to be in alignment with my core values. And so even though they would have said their experience with me was negative, it was a reflection of what they valued, and that wasn't mine. All feedback is a gift, because it will either reveal what you do need to work on, and you can take that and ingest it and synthesize it and choose the parts you want to keep. Always eat the meat and spit out the bones. But even the bad feedback, the negative feedback, the criticism, the sometimes degradation that you might face on a job, it can teach you a lot about what is not for you. And there are plenty of jobs, I'm looking at this formula, there are plenty of jobs where their experience for me, I always say this about most of the jobs that I had, if they had been even just a little bit nicer to me, I would never have changed jobs. Just a little bit, just a little kind, I would probably still be at all these jobs to this day. And that was never the place where I'm supposed to be. So it was their nastiness that actually pushed me to purpose, because I wouldn't have moved on my own. Third part of the equation is the value that you bring. While other people will interpret your value based on what they want, it is important that you have your own clear value proposition to start that benefit transfer. That helps you to save a lot of time. When I talked about the HR functional areas in the second episode, I was looking at the notebook. That's why I'm tapping at y'all. I keep looking over here. But these HR or employee relations functional areas, it is easy to constantly be swayed by what they have going on. Labor relations negotiations, if you want a union position or they come to some type of agreement, collective agreement, or whatever the case may be, it's going to pull you in different directions. Conflict management strategies might pull you in different directions. You got to know the type of value you want to bring, because once they make a decision at the top, you have to make a decision about whether or not you still want to stay in that environment. So I'm going to give you an example. I worked with this lady. It was a team. I was probably the only new person they had in like more than 10 years. So these ladies have been working together like 15 years. It was like a bad marriage. They all secretly hated each other, but just couldn't leave each other. This one lady in particular, she thought she was just going to run all over me like she did the other two ladies in the department, and I was not having it. And I think I might have been the same age as one of her kids or something like that too. So it was like really nasty. And she was the same nationality as the big boss. So they used to be in cahoots. It was just on all levels. And baby, me and her used to be going at it. Now, part of this is because, I got all type of mommy issues. And so any type of like maternal energy where I feel like people trying to lord themselves over me, it just triggers something in me, y'all. And I don't be with that stuff. Like the minute I start getting them type of vibes, like I gotta go for it. So it was that happening. It was also the fact that there was very little role clarity and definition for me. So a lot of what I had to do was playing off of what they had going on at first, because eventually I just demanded my own projects. Age played a part in it. So it was like, again, they treated me like I was their kid, because I literally was like getting close to the age their kids were. It was just a mess. It was a mess on all levels. And so they decided early on that there was a certain value that they wanted me to bring, and I was not for that, period. This lady in particular, we had to have at least like 3 conflict management sessions with different people. Like it was always up the chain. So what I realized was that the role that they wanted me to play on the team, which was almost like a young flunky, I didn't want to play that. Period. I wanted to build my learning and development career. I wanted to get promoted. I was new to this city. I was new to this agency. I was on something totally different, and I didn't want to hear all that. And so for me, the real answer was, girl, you need to go find you another job. Period. That was just it. Like, this is not going to change. These people own what they own. You own something different, so go do something different. And that's what I did. My saving grace, I've talked about this before, is that, child, I don't have no problem going to find another job. Like, I skedaddle up out of stuff fast. I just don't play them games with people. Even with me, my own consultant agency, I'm going to have maybe one conversation, 2, if it's like really important to me. But you get the clowning, I'm going to terminate that contract. Like, your girl getting up out of there. Like, I'm just not that person. And we're going to have an amicable split. I'm going to make sure that everybody do what they do. I mean, I have left money on the table. I done left sometimes connections. Like, I'm done. Because I'm clear on my value proposition. And the more I've worked, again, that's why I said time is a factor. So not just time in a role, but time in your career. You'll learn who you want to be and the role you want to play at work. And when you got something that's making you step too far outside of it and you want to put the brakes on that, put the brakes on it, period. Be clear on how you want to show up, because other people have their own desired value props for you based off of what they need. And sometimes you can play into theirs, right? If you're trying to expand the vision for yourself or you see an opportunity, again, you building out this long-term brand. And so sometimes you take risks, but anything that's requiring you to betray yourself, sis, it's a no. It's a no, because that hurts your overall brand too. If you think about company brands, like let's say, it's a company that sells children's toys. If they bust up tomorrow talk about, okay, we got this new product coming out with e-cigarettes, you'll be like, what? That's completely antithetical to who you are and your values. And you might not ever buy from them again. Brand equals experience plus value. And that's something that you build over time. And I want you to be intentional. It's a great time to do it because by the time this airs, it's just going to be the end of January. But I would love to see you get intentional about what would the next 10 years of your career look like. So in 2035, what should you have accomplished? Who should you be in terms of titling, in terms of leveling? Where would you have worked in the world? Are you an entrepreneur by this point? Are you an entrepreneur? Do you manage people? What types of projects do you work on? Did you have a stint as an entrepreneur and then you dip back into the workforce? Because that's cool too. You don't always have to commit to one for the rest of your life. You can go in and out at any time. Do you do both, right? Do you have a side hustle and you work for somebody else? What does the portfolio look like? Where do you show up? And then all those other things that I named, your social channels, your website, your portfolio, all of those things should back up what is on your resume. So I hope that this helps. Again, the formula to keep in mind is brand equals experience plus value. Let me know in the comments which of those three, brand, experience, or value, are you being most intentional about building this year? Where do you need the most support? Did you hear any new information that surprised you? Of course, again, let me know down in the comments and be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I'm going to catch y'all in the next one. And Happy New Year, y'all. Let's make this year strong. Bye.